When you are.
Very much. I'm just combing, make sure. The hearing will come to order. Good evening. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual public hearing on the ordinance permitting accessory dwelling units in one-family residence districts. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted virtually in accordance with Governor Lamont's public health emergency and civil preparedness orders. Before we begin, I'd like to note that the required legal notice was posted on the town's website and published in the Hartford Courant. The ordinance materials have been posted and are available for review on the town's website in accordance with the governor's executive orders. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Present.
Mr. Gold?
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Winograd?
Here.
And Mr. Williams?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. This is Mayor Cantor again. I would like to note that we have a full quorum from the council. Because of the virtual format of this hearing, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before we begin. I would like to start with a brief overview of the process. We will begin with a presentation by town staff, Matt Hart and then Todd Dumais. Following the presentation by town staff, we will open the floor to members of the public, and I will explain how that process will work in a moment. After the public comment is over, town staff will have 5 minutes to address any issues raised during the public comment. Members of the council will then have an opportunity to ask questions of the town staff. I will call on members in alphabetical order. Each of the council will have 5 minutes to ask questions, which will include the time it takes for the town staff to answer the questions. If I feel an answer has taken an undue amount of the councilor's allotted time, I may grant additional time upon request of the councilor. Also, I will ask participants, including town staff and the members of the council, not to address one another directly. Comments and questions must be made through the chair. After you state your name, simply preface your question or comment as through the chair, and when you are done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond. As the public comment portion of the hearing, as to that section, we will open the floor to members of the public after the presentation by town staff who may participate by video or phone using WebEx. Instructions on how to participate can be found on the meeting notice that was posted on the town website. That's www.westhartfordct.gov in the government section under meetings and agendas. With that, I invite town staff to begin their presentation. We'll start with Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you online. So I'll provide a quick overview of the proposed legislation, and then through you, Mayor, turn to Mr. Dumais. So the proposed ordinance, as the council is well aware, it seeks to amend our current zoning standards that regulate accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in order to establish what we see as a more equitable approach to permit access to this type of housing for current residents as well as for future residents. And we've been engaged in this conversation for some time now. You may recall that we introduced a proposed ordinance in the fall of 2018. And for, a variety of key reasons, including our interest in looking at the topic in more detail as part of the update to the Plan and Conservation Development, we ultimately withdrew that ordinance. Since that time, though, the TP&Z, Town Plan and Zoning Commission, in consultation with the council and other stakeholders, has adopted a new Plan of Conservation and Development, or the POCD. The POCD does have 7 primary goals, and one of those relates to neighborhoods and housing. And in that section, we specifically identify ADUs as a tool that could further the community's goals around housing availability, the range of housing types, as well as affordability levels. So following the adoption of the POCD in early last year, the town council decided to revisit the topic of ADUs. As you know, we held a number of meetings on this throughout the spring and into the summer and into the fall. We had various experts come before us. In staff's opinion, the proposed ordinance that's in front of you this evening would serve to, number one, promote housing choice. Number two, provide a greater range than we have right now of housing affordability levels. Number three, it would provide opportunities for people to either age in place or grow in place. And number four, the ordinance could serve to provide some additional income streams for property owners. Perhaps it may be folks who might be struggling to hold on to a property now. And then lastly, could provide for some potential grand list growth, although we think that would be relatively modest. So in accordance with our charter, when the council first received the ordinance, you referred it out to TPZ. TPZ has looked at it, and I will ask Mr. Dumais to elaborate when I finish, again through you, Mayor, but the TPZ did vote affirmatively to recommend approval of the ordinance, finding it consistent with the POCD. The council also referred the ordinance to the Capital Region Council of Governments as required, and CROGS, they have a regional plan commission. They reviewed it. They found no apparent conflict with any regional plans or policies, and actually that commission, the Regional Plan Commission, did commend the town for seeing this ordinance as a tool that would certainly advance accessory dwelling units in single-family residential districts, and that supports the regional plan of conservation and development. Looking at the operational and financial impact, in staff's opinion, we do not believe that the ordinance, if adopted by you, would lead to any significant operational impacts for the town. Furthermore, our assessor does not believe that the ordinance would negatively impact property values and could lead to some modest grand list growth. So my recommendation, Mayor, is unless you decide to extend it, unless the public hearing raises any unforeseen issues, I would recommend that you move to approve the ordinance following tonight's public hearing. That concludes my overview, and through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Dumais to elaborate on my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Dumais, to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Mr. Hart. For the record, Todd Dumais, Town Planner. I want to go back and take a step back briefly for those members of the public who are watching or perhaps tuning in for the first time, just to provide a little bit of context. Mr. Hart mentioned the past work that the council has done with regard to this topic, but briefly, accessory dwelling units are really secondary residential units that share a single-family lot with a larger primary residence. They have to have a self-contained kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. Across the country and in Connecticut, ADUs are known by several names, including but not limited to accessory apartments, granny flats, guest houses and cottages, or in-law suites. And I think based on the correspondence that the council should have seen from members of the public have called them all of those things in their written testimony submitted so far. Accessory dwelling units are a common form of traditional housing type in the U.S. However, with the advent and adoption of modern zoning in the mid-20th century, many communities either banned them outright or placed numerous regulatory restrictions on their creation. However, more recently across the country and in Connecticut, there is a growing movement not only to permit ADUs, but to promote them as a means to improve housing diversity and affordability and choice. In an effort to do so, communities are re-examining their zoning ordinances or regulations to access any regulatory barriers that discourage the development of ADUs, including complex and lengthy approval processes, occupancy requirements, excessive off-street parking requirements, non-flexible size limitations, and limited location eligibility. As we have discussed in the past, in general, successful ADU ordinances and regulations are restrictive enough to prevent unwanted development outcomes, but flexible enough to support the development and production of ADUs. In some of our past conversations, we noted upon our peer community research, and in particular, some of the research that's being done at the state level, and out of the 169 municipalities, approximately 141, at a minimum, 141 permit accessory dwelling units in their communities throughout the state. So it's not a new concept. We're just refining something that we've had on the books for more than 50 years. As Mr. Hart had asked me to elaborate on, our Planning and Zoning Commission at their regular meeting in January did take this under consideration, and by a vote of 4-1 found the ordinance to be consistent with the plan of conservation and development. The majority of the TPZ did note that the ordinance supports the neighborhood and housing goal to enhance and maintain West Hartford's existing neighborhoods and encourage a diversity of housing types and costs to provide access and availability of housing options to current and future residents. That the ordinance is an excellent way to incorporate a diversity of housing stock into the fabric of West Hartford without additional development. That the parameters of the ordinance as crafted permit opportunity for accessory dwelling units in a conservative manner. And the dissenting vote did note that, in their opinion, the ordinance is incomplete insofar as the specific and substantiated data in need for the amendment was not adequately identified. For that, Madam Mayor, I'll pause here and ask if it's your desire that I go through the construct of the ordinance, or if the council is familiar enough with its construct based on our past conversations, and there's no further desire to go through the individual details of it.
It's kind of you. All right, so I think what we will do is just, if any counselor would like to go through the ordinance, I think we've been through it. I personally feel like we've touched on this a number of times, and feel we don't need to do that. But if I see a hand raised or a text, I will have you do that. Otherwise, we will go to the public comments section. Sorry about this. My phone is off. I apologize. I died. Okay, and do I see any hands? Any raised hands? All right. So, yes, Mr. Oh, that's not. No, I'm just asking from counselors right now. Sorry.
Mayor, is it legal?
Just counselors. This would just be from counselors to go through the ordinance.
Mr. Gold, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Gold.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question about the ordinance. Before, we did have a sunset clause that was in there. That's now been taken out. Is there a reason for that?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Dumais? I think you're on mute.
That was in there. Based on our last conversations, I was under the assumption and direction that that was not required, and there was no need to include it. I'll have to confer with Corporation Counsel Durano whether or not the ordinance that was brought back included it. I don't have that version in front of me. Bear with me one moment.
Thank you. Just for my own, I remember the discussion on this, the fact that it was raised actually by, I think it was Mr. Williams, I'm not sure, that we could just introduce another ordinance. Why would we put a sunset on it? I don't remember which counselor said it, but, and there seemed to be agreement. So I'm wondering if it was then removed. I'm not sure.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dallas Dodge Corporation Counsel. One reason for not including a sunset clause in the ordinance typically would be for the sake of keeping, for keeping our code efficient and organized. it's difficult to have sunset clauses, as that can affect sort of the organization of different sections. I would also note that to the extent there was a sunset clause, the council, if it found within a certain period of time that the ordinance was not working, it would of course be its prerogative to repeal the ordinance if it chose to, which would be the same process as readopting the ordinance after the expiration of a sunset clause. So it's a question of policy for the council, whether they wish for the if they do choose to move forward with this at their meeting later this evening, whether they would like to include a sunset clause. But right now, my recommendation, Madam Mayor, would be to not include a sunset clause. I believe that when an ordinance is adopted, typically, unless there's a particularly compelling reason to include a sunset, that it's generally not advisable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dodge. And we can go to questions later, Mr. Gold, but does that answer your question for the ordinance? Okay. All right. Any other questions or any other review of the ordinance or items in the ordinance that you would like clarified or reviewed right now? I don't see any. Okay. We will go to the public comment portion. Thank you so much, Mr. Dumais and Mr. Hart. I'm sure we will be talking to you shortly, but right now we will go to the public comment portion. Thank you. We will now receive the general public's comments. We have allowed the opportunity to both have WebEx video or phone, which we will begin in a moment. In addition to the opportunity to comment live, members of the public were invited to provide written comments, and any written comments we received have been published on the town's website as a PDF and are embedded in the online agenda. All written comments were also provided to the council and town staff for their review. I will ask the clerk to please read into the record the names of any persons who submitted written comments. Thank you, Ms. LeBeau.
Thank you. October 20th, Mark Merritt from 145 Robin Road is opposed. On January 10th, Martha Rhine, 60 LeMay Street, is in favor. January 11th, Carolyn Darr, 18 Parkview Road, in favor. January 11th, Mark Hughes, 25 Walbridge Road, in favor. January 11th, James and Anne Marie Galvin, 66 Chatfield, in favor. January 11th, Jane Zandy, 16 Dorset Road, in favor. And on January 12th, Robert Johnston, 275 Steel Road, in favor. And those complete the written comments, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeau. We will now open the floor for live comment from the public. And again, we've done this a few times. The video is relatively new for us, so I appreciate everyone's patience with this. We've provided, again, both video or phone access, so if you can't do video, a phone is just as fine. Instructions on how to participate by video can be found again on the town website under the meeting notice under the government section. On the website is www.westhartfordct.gov. The government title and then the subsection is meetings and agendas. By phone, you can reach us at 408-418-9388. That is 408-418-9388. The access code you will need is 132-488-5397. That's 132-488-5397. The moderator will first recognize the video participants. She will unmute and recognize the participants one by one. We will then move to the phone participants, who will be unmuted one by one and recognized by the last 2 digits of their phone number. Callers will then have to press *6. You'll have to press *6 to unmute your line. Out of respect for everyone who wishes to participate, speakers should keep their comments brief, concise, and limited to 3 minutes. Speakers providing testimony on behalf of a group may speak for up to 5 minutes. All speakers must state their name or address. I will also ask commenters to preface their remarks by stating whether they oppose or support the ordinance. As a reminder, phone and WebEx access is only for members of the public who wish to speak. If you do not wish to speak, please hang up or leave the meeting and listen on TV or streaming on the internet. It is hard for us to manage if you remain on. If you've called in and you're also streaming the meeting on YouTube or watching on TV, please silence your other device when you speak. Otherwise, there will be an echo and there will be a delay on the TV and streaming broadcast. It will be difficult for us to hear you. Finally, all comments must be germane to the proposed ordinance, and I ask everyone to please be respectful. Any obscene, offensive, or threatening language will not be tolerated. Anyone who violates this rule will receive a warning, and if the conduct continues, I will ask the moderator to mute that person's phone line for the remainder of the public hearing. If the violation is egregious, the person will be muted immediately. Madam Moderator, please start the public comment. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. We have one caller on the line, and I'll take that call first. I will be unmuting whose phone line ends in number 02. I've now sent a request for your line to be unmuted. Please unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Remember to press *6 to unmute your line.
Caller, please unmute yourself again.
Yes, hi, my name is Tracy Frankel. I live at 28 Farmstead Lane, and I'm just calling in favor of the ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Frankel. Okay, now, moderator, I think you have video callers that you are going to? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I will call on them in the order which they are presented. So I will now unmute Alan Ruiz.
Hi, yes, this is Alan Ruiz. I live at 104 Newport Avenue, and I'm joining this meeting to endorse and support the ordinance. Thank you, Town Council, for this time and opportunity to do so. I just want to mention a few benefits of allowing accessory dwelling units generally. They tend to enhance the character of neighborhoods. They provide citizens of towns the ability to be flexible in the housing choices that are available to them, and also that they can provide as a source of income or as a way to accommodate the increasing and varied family characters of our nation, especially in this era of pandemic when children are moving back in with parents and folks are having to juggle different sizes and characters of families. I myself live in that house I mentioned, 104 Newport Avenue, that has an accessory dwelling unit that was constructed in the late 60s. It was an appealing element of the house when we bought it a few years ago. It makes better use of the small quarter-acre lot on which we stand, and I think allowing these types of units to be built or improved on existing properties will enhance the property value of the town, of the town's properties, and also its tax base. Again, I support this ordinance, and thank you for the time and opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Ruiz. Appreciate it. Okay, now back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will now unmute Jay Stange. You need to unmute. You need to physically hit unmute, sir. There you go.
All right, good evening. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Cantor, council members, and town staff. My name is Jay Stange. That's S-T-A-N-G-E for the record, just like strange without the R. And I'm a new resident taxpayer here in West Hartford. My home address is 177 Auburn Road. This is my first West Hartford Town Council meeting since moving here from Alaska. And I'd like to say that in these extraordinary times, it gives me a lot of peace of mind to gather with my neighbors and turn our attention to local matters in a respectful and earnest meeting like this one. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on the ordinance permitting accessory dwelling units in one-family residence districts. I support this measure because I believe it's important for our community to join efforts worldwide to increase sustainability in our transportation, housing, and resource distribution sectors. A move to enable voluntary expansions in West Hartford housing opportunities is a step in the right direction. So please join me in supporting this ordinance tonight. In reading through the details of the ordinance as modified by staff, I think most of the bases are covered to allow this measure to move forward and be a great success. I hope the council will consider one change, which I think might improve and clarify the effectiveness and expand the use of the ordinance. Please consider removing the requirement to create an off-street parking space for every ADU unit built. I think this requirement appears on its face to be an attempt to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Almost 10 years ago in the city of Portland, Oregon, an ADU resolution was passed which resulted in 744 ADU units created in the single family zones, which included 226,000 homes. And these units had an average number of vehicles per unit of 0.83, or a total of 600 additional cars throughout the municipality. Not enough to make an impact. Here in West Hartford, where off-street parking is mandated, it makes sense to me to let the ADU owners, creators, manage their own off-street parking needs. The new ADU units will be dispersed, and I think parking impacts will be unnoticeable. As a side note, in wrapping up here, I supported an ADU ordinance as the president of my community association, my community council in Anchorage, Alaska, and I was underwhelmed by the number of new units in the coming year that were built. So I think anything that we do to discourage new investments and new housing opportunities in this ordinance is a mistake. And I would hope that we would welcome the intent of the ordinance by removing the off-street parking mandate for one additional space. Thank you, everybody, very much for this opportunity. Happy New Year and have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stange. Welcome to West Hartford, and we hope you're find it a nice new home for you. I appreciate your being here. Okay, Madam Moderator, next person.
Madam Mayor, I will now unmute Julia Carey Ruiz.
Hi, I support this ordinance. My name is Julia Carey Ruiz. I live at 104 Newport Avenue. Alan Ruiz, who spoke earlier, is my husband. We're just working in our different spaces. But I've been volunteering for Desegregate Connecticut because increasing the diversity of housing stock in Connecticut is very important to me. I think expanding accessory dwelling unit allowances in West Hartford would do a lot to further this goal. I'm going to share a personal experience. I have a cousin who is a recent college graduate, and he wanted to move to West Hartford, but he couldn't find housing that was affordable with his entry-level job salary. So I think more ADUs in West Hartford would have almost certainly opened up more housing choices for him. Instead of moving to West Hartford, he ended up moving into his parents' basement in East Lyme, so we lost a potential resident. But thank you for your time, and I hope this moves forward.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz, and I hope you find peace working together. I know it's hard to manage. All right, next person, Madam Mother.
Yep, Madam Mayor, I will now unmute Mlk Reynolds.
Hi, how are you? Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for hearing myself and other residents tonight. My name is Luke Reynolds, and I live at 590 Park Road. And I speak to support the ordinance to allow ADUs in West Hartford. Having lived here my entire life and having worked in affordable housing for years, I know that ADUs are crucial to our town's sustainability and progress towards being an inclusive and affordable place to live. I also agree with Mr. Dumas and Mr. Hart and Mr. Stange and Julia about all the comments that were said. And having read many of the written comments, a lot of them were about aging in place and senior affordability, which I think is extremely notable and important. But I'd like to offer a different perspective, and that's partially of being a young person in West Hartford, and the benefits that ADUs offer to young people like myself and homeowners who are being priced out of West Hartford. And specifically, I think about how ADUs are a diverse housing option for people my age that are seeking somewhere else to live. My friends live in New York City and Boston, and many of them want to move back to West Hartford or a place like it, but apartments are too few and too expensive. Especially now during a COVID-19 pandemic, ADUs offer an incredible alternative from living in a busy city and being able to live close to family and friends and in a diverse housing, housing option that you can consider unique to yourself and still have that independency. And as a homeowner in West Hartford, housing continues to become expensive, and ADUs allow homeowners to increase their property value. Some studies suggest even by up to 50%, and it allows homeowners to rent out ADUs to people and earn a little bit extra money to continue to pay for taxes, our wonderful schools, and our wonderful economy and local businesses. So while ADUs are not the perfect solution to the lack of affordable housing, they are certainly a step in the right direction. And the provisions set forth in the ordinance drafted by council are harmless. And so I rise in support of this ordinance, and I think it's time for West Hartford to join a nationwide trend for smart and innovative planning, and ADUs are part of that smart planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. Appreciate it. Okay, Madam Moderator, next comment.
Madam Mayor, I will now unmute Rick Bush.
Okay. My name is Rick Bush. I live at 62 Lynbrook Road. Mayor Cantor, members of the council and town staff, good to see all of you. Happy New Year to everybody. I've never had the opportunity to appreciate the political process as much as I have this year as a candidate running for public office. There's difficult times that we're in, and we need to heal. We need to come together on common ground, put aside our differences and unite as one great diverse set of people who will work towards a common goal. I'm deeply troubled by the events unfolding in our nation, and I stand with our new president as he tries to unite our great country. That being said, as a contractor in a past career, I was asked several times to construct what we're talking about as accessory dwelling units. I actually constructed 3 of these types of things, albeit without kitchens. And I think ultimately it is a good idea. I think there are one particular flaw that I would like to present tonight that I see in the way that it's worded. My biggest issue is the size of the primary structure and the size of the lot as it relates to the amount of square feet that are being allowed to be constructed. Everybody is talking about how it's a great idea and provides, diverse housing options. And I agree. I am a professional landlord and property manager. I've been doing that for 25 years. So I see the potential for it. I think there's some other flaws, but I think in general, it's a good idea. But so the maximum size that you can build, according to this, is 800 square feet or 30% of the size of the main structure. So only a house that's 2,600 square feet in size could build an 800 square foot unit. So I know that 400 square feet is livable. I lived in 440 square feet, so it's pretty small. But I think ultimately the way that this is written favors larger homes, larger people with larger houses, and it doesn't take into consideration the lot size. So I live on a house that's 1,900 square feet, and I would only be able to build 570 square foot unit, even though I have an acre of land. I have all the other requirements, the setbacks, the parking, all of the other requirements. I qualify, but I could only build a maximum size of 570 square feet. So I think that I would like to see a change put into the ordinance that includes some ability for people who have a larger lot that they could create more square foot accessory dwelling units, especially if it is not attached to the main structure. That's a very important thing, I think, that I would like to see added. So, I was hoping maybe you could delay the vote for 30 days. Let that go back to a discussion. I know that this has been on the table for years. I know that this is an 11th hour request, but I think that there's more discussion that needs to be had. I apologize for not being more vocal in the discussion up until this 11th hour, but I did read the entire ordinance through and through, and I feel like this is a change that really should be added to it. That's it. Thank you very much. It's great to see everybody. I appreciate your time and your attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Okay, next speaker, Madam Moderator.
Madam Mayor, Sean Daly is now being unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I just couldn't get off mute. Thank you.
No problem. My name is Sean Daly. I live at 1779 Asylum Avenue in West Hartford, and I wish to speak on the matter of ADUs that pertains to three key areas that affect our town. I'm not in favor of expansion of the current ADU laws that exist, and here's why. First, housing is not a problem in West Hartford. Even with the influx of New Yorkers moving to Connecticut due to the pandemic, West Hartford continues to have an abundance of homes for sale in town, and we're in line with the national average of 1%. In addition, West Hartford has been identified as one of the top 20 towns in the nation that will have a large share of homes which will be released from senior citizens by 2027 and will be even greater by 2037. Many comments tonight were about affordability. We have housing affordability issues because the majority party on the town council has made it unaffordable to own a home and live in West Hartford due to the consistent and unnecessary property tax increases. ADUs are not the answer to affordability. It's merely a deflection from the true issue in our town, property tax relief. Second, as a member of the West Hartford Conservation and Environment Commission, I see several environmental impact issues. The town still has not conducted an environmental impact study, yet we know there are several issues that need to be addressed. I'd urge someone from our town council to make a motion this evening to table this vote until an appropriate environmental impact study can be performed. We know that ADUs lead to the creation of illegal Airbnbs or other short-term rentals and does not solve low-income home ownership issues, according to recent articles. And including ADUs put a burden on town services from recycling, garbage collection, parking, and the utility grid. Single-family homes have sewage systems designed for only one family, not multiple families residing on the same property. This is also in direct contrast with the proposed Clean Energy Commission plan for 2020 that is looking to reduce, not increase, our need for energy in the next decade and does not support conservation and development. Last, social, cultural, criminal, and wealth building issues support home ownership over ADU rentals. ADUs do not enhance the character of neighborhoods, and the facts show it. The benefits associated with relying heavily on ADUs show a disproportionately accrue to wealthier households who can afford to build them while failing to serve those already cost burdened by rents. Home ownership continues to be a proven method for building wealth over renting, even for low-income earners. Homeownership provides unique social benefits to renting, as children of homeowners do better in school with higher test scores, lower antisocial behaviors, lower crime, drug usage, and they are more likely to be involved in community civic engagements, local elections. In fact, the town of West Hartford has seen property crime, burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft steadily on the rise since 2013, and we're now higher in West Hartford than both the state and the national average. Also, Mr. Hart said it could lead to grand list growth, but he can't say it will because there's no evidence that ADUs lead to grand list growth, and in fact, there's evidence to just the opposite. ADUs do not create diversity, it creates segregation of lower income families in West Hartford. I would completely discourage the town council from voting to change our already existing regulations that cover ADUs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Okay, anybody else on video, Madam Moderator?
Madam Mayor, no more video calls.
Okay, and I understand we have a couple more callers on the line, so we will go back to the callers. Okay, back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will now unmute caller whose phone number ends in numbers 45. Caller, if your number ends in 45, please unmute now. Okay, let's move on. Caller whose number ends in 61, please unmute your phone.
Remember to press *6.
Madam Mayor, oh. Caller, please state your name. Caller whose phone number ends in 61, you may begin speaking now.
Yeah, I'm just listening to the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. It's helpful if all of the people that are on the screen are participating in this, either speaking. If you want to watch the meeting, it's recommended that you either watch online live stream or go to Comcast Channel 5 or Frontier 6098. So thank you. Do you want to try the other caller one more time?
Certainly. Caller whose phone number ends in number 45, you may *6 to unmute your line. Madam Mayor,
okay. Thank you, Jarida. All right, Madam Moderator. Now, I'm going to go back to town staff because there were a couple of comments and questions about potential changes or revisions to the ordinance and what that might do to and how that could happen. I'm wondering if you might want to address that before we go to council comments, and maybe the council will want to follow up on those comments and questions. So we will start with you, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager, and let me address the suggestions in order. First, from Mr. Stange, that we remove the requirement regarding the parking space. That is something we spoke about at committee. Some of our driveways, as council knows, are quite small. We did think that that addition was appropriate. It's certainly something we can evaluate over time and modify if we do not see the need. I would ask Mr. DeMay to elaborate on my comments, Mayor, once I'm complete.
Okay.
Moving on to Mr. Bush's suggestion that we create an exception for larger lot sizes. I think as part of our consideration and the development of the draft, really wanted to make sure that the primary residence was going to be just that, a primary residence, and that the accessory dwelling unit would be something that's accessory to a smaller unit. I could see the reasoning behind the suggestion. Not sure it's warranted at this stage, though. Now, again, something we can evaluate based on experience. So those are the 2 points I wanted to comment on. I don't believe that anyone else had any suggestions with respect to revisions to the ordinance itself. So through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Dumais to elaborate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Dumais?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hart is right. We did evaluate and discuss at length a parking requirement, and I think we were more comfortable recommending a minimum of one space to support these units, but could certainly reevaluate that in the future should the ordinance be adopted. Mr. Bush's comments, it's a very good comment to provide additional flexibility. That's what we've talked about here tonight as part of this ordinance. But it would take a little bit of assessment and exploration of what are the right thresholds and triggers, what's the right lot size to incorporate or allow for additional relief. I remember when we started this process and discussion, that 30% threshold also resulted in a smaller maximum square foot number because it was based on our median home size. So that was increased up to 800 square feet. To try to get a little bit larger homes. That's something we could explore in the future, but I think it would take more assessment and an evaluation if this is adopted, how we could best fit that in to provide additional flexibility for larger sized lots. As Mr. Hart indicated, we were trying to create an ordinance that could apply equally across all of our zoning districts and within those districts equally, and not single out certain standards within a district that weren't provided for. In addition, it was important for us to come up with a construct that really made it abundantly clear that the accessory dwelling unit was subordinate to the primary dwelling unit, and we didn't have a situation where we had the tail wagging the dog, so to speak. So that's how we generally landed on the size limitations contained within the ordinance. I think Mr. Hart's right. Those were the only two suggestions offered for consideration. There was a comment about environmental impact statement that is not typically done, nor can I recall a time when that's ever done, nor is it required when zoning ordinances are going through an adoption process. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Okay, now I will call on the council members. I'm going to ask Mr. Winograd, because this was really his, he was the steadfast champion to bring this forward. And I want to thank him, and I know we will continue to do that tonight for his work on this. But I want to know, at the question point, I know in the council meeting you would like to go first, but would you like to go now, or should we?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I don't have any questions about the ordinance.
Okay, so I will go in alphabetical order, and if you don't have any questions or don't want to make any comments, that's okay. You can just let me know. I'm not seeing everybody's square face, little Brady Bunch square. So if you can just unmute and say, I'm all set. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any questions, but I do want to express thanks to Councilor Winograd, town staff, all the presenters that have brought us this vital information on why it's important that we bring this to our town. And just as all the other commenters stated tonight, my position is clear and I will be supporting this. So again, thank you, especially to you, Councilor Winograd.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Davidoff.
Madam Mayor, I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Fay.
Yes, thank you. I'm all set.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Gold.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Kerrigan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, quick question. if we were going to make a statement in support, would this be the time, or would we wait till we're going to do a vote and this is just for questions?
Well, this is for questions, and at the council meeting when you vote, that
Oh,
would be
that's
the time.
right. It's been a long time. I forgot. Thank you. I have
That's okay. I know, it all blends together. It's been one very, very long day.
I apologize for everyone for coming on late. It was a technical issue. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd, I think you said no questions, and I'm assuming, or comments? Okay, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, 2 years ago, a similar iteration of this policy was reviewed by the town Planning and Zoning Commission, and we received a memorandum from them where they unanimously, on a bipartisan basis, rejected the concept for a variety of reasons. And one of them, I think the first one listed, was essentially that they had concerns that the resolution or ordinance, I should say, would unilaterally change all single-family zoned properties to potentially multi-family units, essentially immediately. And so there was concerns about it being overly broad. And I understand that over the time that has passed since then, there's been some changes to the policy to try to address some of the commission's concerns. That being said, am I correct that the concern that single-family zoning as we know it would be changed overnight by virtue of this policy being passed by the town council? And if I'm missing something and there's a distinction to be made, could you just let me know? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll start with Mr. Hart and then go to Mr. Dumais. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Just Matt Hart, Town Manager, in response to Councilor Williams. The ordinance that's in front of the council now is substantially different from what we introduced back in 2018. I cannot speak to that in detail because I do not have the 2018 edition in front of me, but I do know that we revised it substantially. And with respect to your direct question, Councilor Williams, Mr. Dumais can provide a more technical answer, but I would not agree with that characterization. I do not feel that the council's adoption of this ordinance would create all of our, automatically designate our single-family residential districts in some way as multifamily. You know, there's a discrete set of requirements that someone looking to construct one of these units would need to comply with. So, Mayor, through you, I would turn to Mr. Dumais, and he can provide a more technical response to Councilor Williams' question. He could probably also talk a little bit about, if you wish, the TPC discussion in 2018 versus today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councilor Williams. Councilor Williams, back in 2018, one of the additional findings that the TPC made, and one of their main concerns was the note that the plan of conservation and development was essentially expired and needed to be updated, and we had just begun that process. Since that time, our plan of conservation and development has been completed. It's valid now for 10 years, and this issue and the housing issue in general was a significant discussion point, as you can see from the housing goal and the specific action items of which they found this current ordinance to be consistent with. So knowing their conversation back and concern back in 2018, that was one of their larger concerns, is outside of that POCD process, this was a big change to make outside of that process. Circling back to your other question regarding the characterization of this ordinance as a change of all single-family zoning to two-family zoning, I like Mr. Hart would say, no, that is not what we're discussing here. If we were discussing that, we'd be talking about a change of single-family zoning to a two-family zoning district. The closest thing we have here in West Hartford is the RM3R. Obviously, we're not talking about opening RM3R to the entire town. That's not something we're discussing. That zoning ordinance, if we were to do that, allows for essential as-of-right development without all of the restrictions and limitations we're talking about to ensure that the accessory unit is subordinate and accessory to the primary dwelling unit. In that instance, you could have equally sized units across a property. That's what I'd offer to your questions or comments, Mr. Williams.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Dumais. Mr. Williams?
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chris Williams. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. My point is not, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, my point is not that this automatically turns every single family unit into multi-family unit. What my comment is, and I think, well, I know this is something that the commission was concerned about 2 years ago, is that overnight it turns single-family zoned properties into potentially multifamily housing for the vast majority of properties. And I believe that's the same situation here now as it was 2 years ago. Isn't that piece correct?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Dumais?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councilor Williams, that piece is essentially the same, that you're providing obviously the construct of each ordinance is different, as Mr. Hart explained, but the basic premise, as you've laid out, Mr. Williams, that allowing a single-family property to have an additional housing option in the form of an accessory dwelling unit is correct. Again, the prior plan of conservation and development was not as strong in supporting this additional housing choice and diversity, and that is a primary difference. In addition, as we've spoken in the past, our existing ordinance allows this type of housing in every zone in town. It just has more stringent requirements. So really what we're talking about is a change of the requirements to provide for the opportunity to access this type of housing. We already allow accessory dwelling units in all of our single family zones. You have to have twice the minimum lot area, and there's a limitation to 3 rooms, but there's no size limitation, there's no parking requirements. It's already provided for in our ordinances, and we're having a conversation about updating that, making it more innovative and more accessible to more people in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Mr. Williams, anything further? Okay, Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Just to add to Mr. Dumais' remarks, if you look at the ordinance itself, Section A, subsection 6 talks about how the accessory dwelling units shall be designed to preserve the one-family residential character of the dwelling. And it has various subsections that talk about the orientation of the unit, making sure that there's privacy for adjoining homes, talks about the materials that would be required as part of the construction, roof shapes, etc. So, you know, we've gone to some length here to ensure that if one of these is constructed, the primary unit plus the ADU itself would be consistent with our single family neighborhoods. So just wanted to add that as additional commentary, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And just a question on the 141 communities that permit ADUs out of the 169. I mean, that's the same case in all of them, correct? I mean, they might have different restrictions, but that application of a single family home, that's what an ADU by definition is, correct?
Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. In those 141 communities in Connecticut, they allow accessory dwelling units. So that is correct. Again, they have different standards and different provisions to access them, but 141 allow them.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any further questions? We went through the whole council. I think everybody is all set. Before we close the hearing, I want to read into the record letters dated from TPZ January 6th recommending approval, and from CROG dated January 5th finding no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. And if there is no objection, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, I will close the public hearing. And now this hearing is closed. We will go into the council meeting in 5 minutes. Okay? Just a quick little break. Okay, as soon as you guys are ready, we're ready to go. Okay, don't see everybody on video yet, but we would like to get started within the minute.
Mayor Cantor, WHCI is also ready for us.
Thanks so much. Okay, Madam Moderator, do we have everybody back?
Counselor Kerrigan, can confirm if she's back. And
Okay. All right. We're ready to go. I am calling the January 12th Town Council meeting to order. Before we begin, I would just like to make some brief comments about the violent events that took place last week as Congress met in joint session to count electoral votes. I know other members of the council have some thoughts as well, and we will hear from them during the announcements portion of the meeting. Like most Americans, I was heartbroken and disturbed to see a violent insurrection in the heart of American democracy. More than 150 years after the end of the Civil War, it was sickening to see the Confederate flag and other symbols of hate carried through Congress by a violent occupying force. We are incredibly fortunate that no members of Congress were seriously hurt or killed, which was the clear intent of some of the insurrectionists. The American experiment has never been easy, and we have survived attacks from within before. I have no doubt that we will endure this difficult period, and I will call on all residents of West Hartford to keep faith in our democratic institutions and commit themselves to peaceful constitutional governance. Although reciting the Pledge of Allegiance is a routine part of our meetings, the words feel especially poignant and even more fragile tonight. I pray for our republic and the safety of our citizens. I pray for the wisdom and patience to stand together as one nation, indivisible. The peaceful transition of power was a beacon to the world, and now it is a scarred part of our history. Finally, I want to express my deepest gratitude for the brave Capitol police officers who were assaulted and killed defending the U.S. Capitol last Wednesday, and I ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence for our country and in honor of these guardians of democracy. We also remember 375,124 of our fellow Americans that have lost their lives to COVID. So we will take a moment of silence. Okay, and if you are able to stand, please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Brill.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Present.
Mr. Gold?
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Winograd?
Here.
And Mr. Williams. I see Mr. Williams. I can't hear him. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrow. Thank you, Ms. LeBrow. Next section is public forum. We will begin the public forum. Any resident or taxpayer of the town who wishes to address the council regarding any item on the agenda which is not otherwise subject to public hearing may call 408-418-9388, access code 132-488-5397. I also understand that we may have some members of the public who have logged into WebEx and wish to participate that way. We will recognize each member of the public one by one. Please state your name and the street you live on prior to speaking, as only West Hartford residents and taxpayers are permitted to participate in the public forum. Finally, under our standing rules, only items on the agenda may be addressed during the public forum, and comments that are not germane to the agenda will be ruled out of order. So, Madam Moderator, will you begin the public forum?
Madam Mayor, we have no public participation at this moment.
Okay. We will end the public forum. That section is now finished, and members, any member who is on, which I don't think we were, you can continue to listen to WHC TV Live or Comcast Channel 5 Frontier 6098. Consent calendar. Without objection, I move that we place items 4A, B, C, D, 5C, 7G, H, I, J, K, and L on the consent calendar. Is there any objection? Okay, I don't see any objection. So we will, without objection, I move the adoption of the items on the consent calendar. Is there any objection? There being no objection, items on the consent calendar are adopted. Approval, oh no, that's okay, unfinished business. I'm sorry, we are going to reports from and communications, reports from the town manager. Mr. Hart, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining or viewing tonight's meeting. Council, I did attach a lengthy report in board docs. Please feel to review it at your convenience. I would like to thank Ms. McHugh and all of our directors for putting that together. You'll find an overview of the activities of our various departments, and hopefully it's informative to you. I would like to touch on a couple of other matters. I'd like to commend and thank our health district under the leadership of Health Director Amy Kraus. They have been conducting vaccination clinics to administer the COVID-19 vaccine. Our health district is using the vaccine produced by Moderna. And right now, as you may be aware, people who are in phase 1A have been approved to receive the vaccine. With respect to municipal employees, that primarily relates to first responders as well as certain healthcare personnel. We are gearing up to move to phase 1B. We expect to receive information from the state soon. We are hearing that the people who will likely qualify and be eligible to be vaccinated as part of stage 1B will include people working in the education sector, whether that's early childhood, pre-K through 12, higher ed, people who are working in manufacturing, all sorts of other frontline essential workers, such as people working in grocery stores, restaurant, food service establishments, agriculture and farm workers, delivery personnel, public transit, a whole variety of social and governmental services, such as social services, code inspection, personnel, public works, etc. people who work and run utilities, as well as others who may be deemed eligible in that class. As our elected officials, the town council and Board of Ed members will also be eligible to receive the vaccine through the town, and we will make sure to inform you as soon as you are eligible for that. Members of the general public who fall into these categories are also able to receive the vaccine at the clinics that are being run by our health district. So again, I want to thank them for doing a very good job to date. They've had a handful of clinics thus far, and they will be continuing this for several months. That's what we expect and anticipate. Moving on, a couple of other things I'd like to touch on, Mayor. I'd like to thank Ms. Reinheimer for working with the mayor and all of the chairs of the council standing committees. The standing committees are beginning to meet again with the start of 2021. For this month, the Finance and Administration Committee is scheduled to meet at 6 p.m. on the night of January 21st. I will be in touch with the Deputy Mayor to prepare an agenda for that meeting. The council, your next regular meeting, we do have a public hearing. We're going to start at 6:30 on January 26th. And then the Public Works and Facilities Committee, that will be the final committee meeting that we will have this month. And that committee is scheduled to meet at 8 a.m. on January 28th. You should have received calendar invites from Ms. Reinheimer for all the committees that you sit on. So I want to thank her for doing an excellent job putting that all together. Just two other things I'd like to touch on, Mayor, before I pause and take any questions. I'm sure we are all aware of the threats that we have heard about potential marches and other protest activity that could occur either in our nation's capital or in state capitals all around the country this coming weekend, as well as on Inauguration Day. So we are in frequent communication with our federal and state partners. You know, we're not hearing any intelligence right now that indicates that we can expect some of this activity to occur in West Hartford, but we need to be prepared, and we also need to be prepared to assist our colleagues in the capital region. So this weekend, we will have an increased number of staff on duty. The chiefs will be on duty. I will be on duty. We may open our emergency operations center. If we do, I will let you know, and I will keep you apprised of any developments we see there. And then the last item I'd like to touch on, if I could, Mayor, as part of my report, maybe a more positive item, if you will. I would like to thank one of our librarians who's retiring, Agatha Moynihan. Perhaps some of you know Aggie. She has been working with the town for several years now. She started her service with us back in 1999, working part-time, and eventually moved her way up to full-time. The position she held most recently was as a full-time reference librarian, and she's done a fabulous job in that role. Really want to thank her for her long tenure and service to the town of West Hartford, and wish her all the best in the future. So that's my report for this evening, Mayor. I'll stop and take any questions that you or other council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there questions for the town manager? Mr. Williams.
No question, but just to take the opportunity to also congratulate Aggie Monahan. She is actually my brother's mother-in-law, and my brother's wife, Julie, went to high school with me in Dallas, so it's a nice kind of West Hartford family. I'm sure she's watching tonight, so it's nice of you, Mr. Hart, to acknowledge her service, and I'd like to also congratulate her. Thank you.
Oh, that is really sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anybody else have any questions or comments for the town manager? Mrs. Kerrigan, is that you?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Matt Hart. And since you're here, I would ask this question. I live on Arnoldale. There's about 6 no parking signs that were put up by assumed town staff. Do you have any idea why they're there? I didn't know whether it had to do with trees coming down or road work, and I was going to call John, but I figured since you're here, I'll ask you the question.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Hart?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Councilor Kerrigan, I do not know the answer to your question. I'll find out. Just speculating, maybe Eversource is doing some tree work in that location. I know they've been working in other parts of town. They were on St. Augustine today. Councilor Blanks made me aware of that. So, but I'm just speculating there. So I'll verify and follow up with you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Kerrigan, anything further?
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just trying to take advantage of the fact that you were sitting there. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else for Mr. Hart? Mr. Hart, for Mr. Hart. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. In response to Councilor Kerrigan, we've got excellent and talented staff who are watching this meeting. So Mr. Phillips informs me that those no parking signs have been set up because we're going to be completing some road work, a drainage trench at that location.
Wow.
Thank you. You guys are
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Yeah, thank you, and very efficient. Yeah, well done. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hart? Comments? Okay. I also want to thank Aggie and wish you a very wonderful, good health and much happiness in the next phase. Okay. Now we go to Mr. Dodge, Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no formal report, and I'm pleased to report we will require no executive session this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Any questions for Corporation Counsel? I don't see any. Okay. Well, with that, we will go to unfinished business. Ordinance permitting accessory dwelling units in one-family residence districts. I move that we adopt. Mr. Hart, could you please summarize?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'm going to provide a shorter version of the summary I provided at the public hearing. And I do know that Councilor Gold, I believe, has a question about enforcement. So after I complete my overview, Mayor, through you, I would ask Mr. DeMay to speak to that issue. So as a quick summary for people who may be watching, the proposed ordinance is designed to amend our current zoning standards that we have in place that regulate accessory dwelling units. And this is designed to achieve a more equitable approach to permit access to this type of housing. This is an issue, a subject that the council has been discussing for a couple of years now. Importantly, our plan of conservation and development was recently updated by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The POCD, that plan, does have an entire section devoted to neighborhoods and housing, and does specifically list accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, as a zoning tool that could help promote. It would not be a panacea in and of itself, but could help promote some of the plan's goals around housing. In our opinion, in staff's opinion, the proposed ordinance would serve to achieve 5 larger goals. Number 1, to promote housing choice. Number 2, to provide a greater range of housing affordability levels. Number 3, to provide age in place or grow in place opportunities. Number 4, to provide additional income streams for property owners. And number 5, an opportunity to provide, and I would say modest potential for groundless growth. In accordance with the provisions of the charter, the council did refer this ordinance to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for its review. The TPZ did vote to recommend approval of the ordinance, finding it consistent with the POCD. The council also referred the ordinance to the Capital Region Council of Governments, or CROG. CROG has a regional plan commission, which also reviewed the ordinance and recommended its adoption. Moving on very quickly to the operational financial impact. Under staff's assessment, we do not believe that the council's approval of this ordinance would create any significant operational impacts for the town. Our assessor does not think that the adoption of this ordinance would negatively impact property values and, in fact, could enhance property values in some parts of town. Staff, based on the extensive review that the council has devoted to the proposed ordinance, we are recommending its approval. That's my overview, Mayor, and through you, I would turn to Mr. DeMay to talk about how we would enforce the provisions of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. DeMay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one thing we did neglect to discuss, we had discussed it in earlier meetings, was an enforcement provision. Since this is a zoning ordinance, it's an administrative site plan review. So anyone who's looking to advance, if this is adopted, an accessory dwelling unit under these provisions will require a site plan. Those will be tracked through the Planning and Zoning Office. We'll know which properties have them, and any complaints arising from the construction of an accessory dwelling unit would be dealt with either by our zoning enforcement officer if there are complaints related to occupancy, or if there are other complaints that might be under the jurisdiction of either the fire marshal, our West Hartford Health District, or potentially the building division should a dwelling unit not be constructed in accordance with any approved plans. So it would be the standard enforcement personnel involved, and any future issues arising would be dealt with on a complaint by complaint basis, as they are for all other housing code matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. We are out of the public hearing. I'm sorry, that was could have had a more back and forth there. Mr. Dodge, would it be appropriate if Mr. Gold has a follow up to that or clarification?
Yes, Madam Mayor, a technical clarification is appropriate during the meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Gold, anything further from you or clarification on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I do not. Thank you for that clarification, Todd. I appreciate it.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I think we will start with Mr. Winograd on comments. But before Mr. Winograd frames the ADU journey for all of us a little bit, again, this was subject to a public hearing. I want to thank Ben for his really his passion and his commitment to this. He has been really reasonable, but I think showed a lot of perseverance in getting us over the goal line. This is something that is a national trend. There is a lot of material out there, and Ben felt that this was a very important step for West Hartford to take. I agreed with him, but he took the lead on it, and I'm very appreciative for all of his work. I also want to thank staff for their incredible, this has again been a lot of work, and it was throughout the POCD as well that had the impact and the importance to guide us on this ordinance right now. So over to Ben now for introductory comments and his own piece of this. Thanks.
Ben Winograd, Town Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The thank you was in the speech, but I'll thank you again for your comments. I also want to thank Matt Hart, Todd Dumais, Gina and Dallas from Corporation Counsel's office for the work they've done, the TPZ, and also colleagues on two different committees that changed in name over the years, who studied this issue really over the past 3 years. Dallas actually gets double mention there because he was on both that committee and now prior to becoming Corporation Counsel, as well as everybody who spoke out at the public hearing tonight and in letters we've received. At long last, we finally have an opportunity tonight to decide whether or not we want to maintain what has effectively been a ban on accessory dwelling units. There were exceptions. It does exist as a concept, but realistically, for the vast majority of homeowners in West Hartford, it was not an option. It's no surprise that I want to lift the ban for all of the reasons cited in the ordinance and in Mr. Hart's really excellent introduction. I'm confident that the ordinance as drafted strikes a good balance between the rights of the homeowners to make improvements to their own property, the public good of such improvements in terms of tax revenue, stability, and diversification of housing options, and the very limited and speculative impact such an improvement might have on neighbors. That being said, I believe the suggestions of Mr. Stange and Mr. Bush are worthy of more discussion and consideration in the future, and I hope we have those discussions. It is my position, broadly, that when we are using the powers of the government, and that's what we are, as the state, as the government, we prohibit property owners from using their own property as they wish, we have to have a good reason to do so. Often we do have that good reason. In this case, I have heard no good, compelling reason to continue this effective ban. But before I go into a few details, I'd like to give a little history, my personal history of how I got here. After I left for college, my mother, a widow, was able to keep our house on 4 Mile Road by renting out rooms. Because she was willing to share her kitchen, this was perfectly legal under the zoning rules. Her tenants over the years were a diverse group of grad students, immigrants working to bring family members here, a very noted sushi chef, just getting his business off the ground, and other valuable members of our community while they lived in her house. I believe this was a good thing for West Hartford as well as for her, and I doubt anyone would suggest that this should have been illegal. She had friends, however, less willing than her to share their personal space, who added small kitchens and walled off extra bedrooms to accommodate their tenants. These were illegal. But aside from the potential danger from such unregulated work, I could never understand why there was a ban on how their situation, or a ban on them, and how their situation was any different than my mother's, in terms of impact on certainly on neighbors or the community. After I was elected, I started learning more about zoning law and its impact on affordable housing. I studied the options available to diversify our housing stock and had discussions with affordable housing advocates. I came to believe that the ban should be reconsidered. So in early 2017, I initiated preliminary discussions at the committee level, at the time the Community Planning and Physical Services Committee. We reviewed the growing literature on the topic, learned, among other things, what to call these things. I had to learn not to use the term mother-in-law apartments, and I constantly forgot what an ADU stood for. I had to keep little notes to write down accessory, because I always forgot what the A was. After quite a lot of discussion, we ended up with an ordinance that was submitted to council, referred to TPZ, and promptly voted down unanimously. Matt Hart and Todd Dumaine they have covered the process since then, of more study, a lot more work, leading through the POCD and eventually to TPZ approval. I don't need to repeat that, but it was quite a long struggle. As far as I'm concerned, this has been one of the more well-researched and debated initiatives I've seen from this body. So is it a good idea? The ordinance does not change any of the rules regarding density, setbacks, or building standards, except to the extent an ADU must be oriented to preserve the privacy of neighbors, oriented meaning where it faces, architecturally complement the primary dwelling, have an extra parking spot, which, to Mr. Stange's point, was debated somewhat as to whether that was necessary. It also requires that one of the units, the primary or the accessory, be owner occupied. Through these efforts, I'm convinced that neighbors are being protected. So what does it do? It ends the effective ban on having a separate apartment in your home or on your property for an elderly parent, a disabled adult child who needs a little bit of extra observation but still wants some independence, a recent graduate not yet able to afford a larger apartment, or even a sushi chef saving his money so he can launch a new business. It ends the ban of using such an apartment to help pay the mortgage or groceries. It ends the ban on this type of investment in your home as you benefit our community. And it ends the ban on one small way private investment can add to the diversification of our housing options. This must not be the end of our efforts to address the lack of affordable housing in West Hartford. It is barely even a step in that direction, but it is low-hanging fruit, an easy effort that will harm no one, cost nothing, and again, at least be a step in the right direction. With that, I urge my colleagues on council to support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winograd. And again, thank you for your commitment to this and getting us to this point. Okay, we're going to go in alphabetical order again because it's been a long week. Ms. Blanks, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's funny because when this discussion first began, I too needed to know a little more about it. And just like when you buy a new car, you see all the other cars on the road that looks like yours. So I've just heard more and more information about these accessory dwelling units since this discussion started. And especially with the time that we're in, I think it's more appropriate now than ever. Many of you have already discussed our aging parents, other relatives as well, so not just our parents, but our young adult children who are home from school, and as they begin to look at graduation and are starting out, these accessory dwelling units would give them a beginning start so that they can save money and eventually buy a home in town and stay and contribute. And I do believe that it meets all of the aspects. In addition, it's an option, right? I mean, we talk about affordable housing, we talk about diversity, we talk about all those types of things. But I think more importantly, it does offer an option for folks. Some people may not want to spend a lot of money on a large home. Maybe they just want a small space to live in. In my community, we have many of those. And so I think that this does that. And just like many other places around the country that are looking at these accessory dwelling units to respond to some of those issues and questions, I think it does it. And again, West Hartford is always at the forefront, always trying to be creative and thinking outside of the box. And I think we offer that. And for those reasons, I will be supporting this. And just as I said all along, I think we have to think forward thinking and not just for today, but in the future and what West Hartford will look like 20 years and 30 years out. Thank you. Back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's kind of interesting to go after Mr. Winograd. I'll be much more brief than he was this evening. And I just would like to thank him for taking leadership and basically following through on something that you felt very passionate about from beginning to end. Kudos to town staff, the planner, the manager, and our corporation council office. I think all the highlights that have been pointed out this evening, and I will be voting in support of the ordinance this evening.
It was so quick. I was not ready with my mute button. Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Okay, Ms. Fay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cantor. I think you know, housing is a very important topic, and zoning as well as property rights that owners have. So I've been consistent in my approach of looking at the existing zoning and and ordinances, et cetera, of people when they go to buy their home, their most important and most expensive asset. I think they rely on the current situation when they purchase that home. So I think they expect single family homes to remain as is. And I know ADUs are slightly different than converting a home into a multifamily, but I do think people rely on the zoning at the time and the neighborhood characteristics and other things. I think Mr. Daly, Sean Daly, made some very compelling arguments of why ADUs do present challenges and aren't necessarily ideal for a community. I think West Hartford is great and terrific, and I love it. And I think we do things cutting edge, but I'm not sure this is, just because some other towns in the area out of the 169 in Connecticut have that. I'm not sure it's suitable here. For one, we are very compact and very dense. I'm not going to repeat what Sean Daly said. I think everybody heard and understood what he was saying, which I agree with what he said. But this is a very densely populated town. We have very small building lots, extremely small. I do think parking is an issue. I would not want people to park on the streets. We do have an ordinance that says from 2 to 5 o'clock, 2 a.m. to 5 o'clock in the morning, there is no parking on the streets. I don't think we should change that for a lot of reasons. Our roads are narrow, people speed, and I think it presents danger. So I am not supportive of this for a number of reasons, and I will not be voting to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Number one, I do want to thank Ben for his time, his patience, his perseverance. I appreciated our late Friday afternoon phone call for longer than I expected, but thank you. I appreciate the grooviness of a Greg Brady type of flat in the back of your house, but I've expressed my concerns in the past relative to economic studies that I don't think have been completed in full. I'm not necessarily 100% against ADUs, but I still think there needs to be some more flushing out of the economic impact that it has on our town by way of police, fire, sanitation, roads, parking, education. By blanketing effectively the town with an as of right ADU component, you're potentially creating more density than the town can support, and those are some of the things that concern me at this time. So for those reasons, in addition to, and one of the other topics I discussed was the lot size, and I think Rick Bush made an excellent point in dealing with that, and I think that's something that needs to be flushed out in terms of having requirements of lot size. So for all those reasons, at this time, I don't think it would be appropriate to move down the path of ADUs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank Ben. We all have. I remember sitting in the council room in 2017 when the state passed this, and we made a decision to sort of opt out at the time so that West Hartford could give this more thought and do it in a manner that fits and is in keeping with who West Hartford is. And your patience, your perseverance, your thoroughness, I'm so thankful that you did what I think is a good thing for West Hartford. I think that it's important to have options for many different kinds of families and many different kinds of people. And though we may have a housing stock now that satisfies you if you want to be in a multifamily or a single family or an apartment or a condo or institutionalized living, assisted living or nursing home, it does not at all touch the needs of a more diverse community. Really quickly, I think about when Jody and I moved to West Hartford in 2001, her sister, who lived 3,000 miles away, would gladly have came out here if we had a ADU in the back to live there. We would have gladly paid more for a house that had an ADU for her to age there. Now, instead of being 3,000 miles away and unable physically to make her way across the country to be with us, it would provide both safety for her and peace of mind for us. My sister, whose son emotionally still lives with them. I mean, physically he's there, but emotionally he needs to be there. He's in his 30s. It's not in West Hartford, but if they lived in West Hartford, if again ADUs would be available, he would have that sense of pride, that sense of independence. At the same time, my sister and her husband would feel safe. They'd feel comfortable knowing that he was just a stone throw away. Pride, it's a good thing. And my son, Carlos, who did not go off to college, even though he saw so many of his friends go off to college, is left at home. Not that it's not a bad place to be, but for a young son who wants to have a little feeling of getting away from his mom's and having a sense of independence, but yet still being where we can sort of keep an eye on him and feel safe, it gives him a sense of independence. This type of arrangement would work really well, because he works the night shift. I will say that, to Sean Daly's point, this will not discourage home ownership. So to equate ADUs and home ownership, I think there's a relationship that doesn't really exist. With respect to flushing a toilet or brushing your teeth, if Carlos was doing that in an ADU in our backyard, or whether he's doing it in the house, it's going to tax the, no pun intended, tax the services with respect to the sewer system the same. And with respect to our school enrollment, it is on the decline. So I think what ADUs is, they provide that sort of balance between safety, independence, and dignity. So I'm thankful, Ben, that you really shepherded this through the process and did what you made happen. So I'll be supporting this, and I'm thankful.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ben, when I first got on the council, I think this is the first thing you asked me about. And I think most importantly, what I learned from this issue is that the patience that you had, and I think that we've all become a little bit more understanding of the need for patience after this year, and you demonstrated this right from the jump. I would say that one of the interesting things about this issue is that Ben was pushing this issue before I think people had really been talking about affordable housing, and I just want to give kudos to that. But I think the most important thing that what we're dealing with here today is that I think in West Hartford, and it hasn't really been touched on, West Hartford has one of the largest IDD communities in the state. In fact, that's why a lot of people come here. In my youth, I worked for the town and worked on camps with families who had, children that were severely disabled and had a lot of issues of which their parents had to take care of them. I also then started working with some of the adults, and the strain that it puts on a family is immense. And the fact that here now in West Hartford, we can provide some relief for those families that have, in some cases, moved their families here to participate in our school programs that then provide them the best education they can get for students with severe IDDs is something that I think is a really good connection for this town to be made. In regard to the comments that were made earlier by Mr. Daly, I don't think any one of them was based on fact. A lot of it seemed like fear mongering to me, and there's just nothing to prove anything about. I think there was talk about crime and all that. I mean, it's just nonsense, and I think that we should not discount it and not point to it as relative testimony that was provided here today. But I do think that one of the things that I also want to point out is that how this proposal got before us is because of the experience that Ben had here growing up in West Hartford, in his experience with the West Hartford housing stock. And I think that shouldn't be lost on us. I think what's one of the things that has really moved me and the reason for supporting this, but more importantly, there's a clear need for this here in town. And then I will be supporting this, and very happy, and thank you to the town staff for working on this with Ben over the last couple of years. I know it's been an uphill battle, but thank you all, and Ben, thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You all know how I feel about this issue. Mr. Dumais and Mr. Winograd, I appreciate the work you've done. I know you've spent a lot of hours on it, and it's just a policy difference from my perspective. It's not personal. 2 years ago, when we went down this path, the focus was really affordability. And Ben shared with us the story about his mom. And at that time, I felt like it was an acknowledgement that the tax burden of the town was unsustainable. And so my thought was, well, let's not change zoning, let's fix the tax burden. In the time that has passed since that point in time, we've shifted the argument a little bit. Affordability is still a big focus of it, but also into, the housing stock, making sure we have a diverse housing stock. And it's funny, we have this debate on this body about whether or not we have diverse housing, where it's located, is it intermingled enough, things of that nature. I think it's a healthy discussion. But from my view, I do think we have a very rich housing stock. And in fact, one of the problems we have as a community is we have a lot of lowercase affordable housing, meaning there's housing that is affordable, and not so much big capital A affordable, which is subsidized housing. But in my view, I don't think we have a lack of diverse housing stock to justify a policy like this. I think one of the concerns, and to echo something that's been said to me tonight, is that I'm not sure we have a full understanding as to the fiscal impact that this could have on people who both invest and build an ADU, which would probably be positive to them. But more concerning, I think, potentially is the outcome to the surrounding parcels. In other words, if someone builds an ADU, what's the impact financially on the neighbors? And I think that's something we should be certain about before we make such a broad zoning change or lift what Ben described as accurately an effect of ban. So I cannot support this, but I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Again, I want to thank town staff. I also, Mr. Hart and Mr. Dumais, you really did spend a lot of time on this, especially Mr. Dumais, and also the outreach that this has taken years to develop because of the POCD. And I remember looking at the POCD and looking at the priorities of the hundreds of residents that actually looked at housing and weighed in, and there was significant feedback in supporting further housing options. I want to also thank the TPZ for their extensive work and their commitment, and really seeing things after listening to the public and looking at all the different groups that brought different ideas and drafted the the POCD. So it's really, really important document that governs us. But again, the amount of input that went into it is why we're where we are. I also want to thank, obviously I want to thank Ben and everybody else for listening and for giving us all the kind of the space to get to this point. One of I think when I was talking to a friend of mine who has my second son is 30 years old now, and they have an intellectually disabled son that was a good friend of my son's, and watching them mature and grow and go to college and work in jobs, and the different challenges of this particular family, and understanding that there's never a time that they're not concerned about how their son is going to grow and age in a safe way and an independent way, but he can't be completely on his own. And this was something they've been asking for. And it's not just maybe in their home, but in another home where he can find an affordable way to live. The ADUs also are ADA compatible or can be made ADA compatible in a way that a home might not be able to be retrofit, so that an elderly relative, and maybe not an immediate relative or an elderly person that somebody cares about can live. We have heard during this year of the pandemic how important it is to come up with a very creative living spaces for people, and I think it's a real important addition now. And we don't know. I don't know how much it will be used, but I know if it works and helps 3 to 5 to 20 families, that's really, really something. So, and we need to move in that direction. I read this article that said, it started off by telling people ADUs is a great idea is despicable. You're ruining older neighborhoods left and right. And then it went into all the reasons why it's not. There was sort of a top 10. But one of the things they talked about the ADAs, but they also talked about a person in their 60s could build a ADU to provide themselves security down the road, understanding that they might want to stay in that house. And they could rent it out until the time comes when maybe they need a caretaker to live there when they want to live independently. They talked about the potential of it really impacting an area and how it's selective because it's not a cheap an inexpensive option for a homeowner. This is a commitment, and many people want a single family environment with nobody else living there. That's those are but to have an option is important. That actually density. One of the reasons why West Hartford is so successful is the density and the walkability, and usually it's one person in that unit. It's not, generally 3 people in a small unit. Most ADUs are rented to 1 or maybe 2 people. And that was one of the research items in this article. And it is an infill development. It's often underutilized and underutilized land, and our families have changed. We are having less children. Family size is smaller. Larger homes are expensive to maintain, and we have a lot of them. And we need to give our homeowners options so they can keep up and maintain the homes that we that have made West Hartford, sort of brought this the beauty and a lot of the history that have made us a bit unique, I think. ADUs tend to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable. That is something that we knew. They've again, the flexibility for families as they change and age, whether it's young to old and old to young and all of those things. So they also finally it said that people are priced out of neighborhoods they've spent decades in, and isn't it important to us to help to give them another option? They're not a silver bullet, but it's a really low-hanging fruit that we can give some people the flexibility and the options that they want in their homes that they've worked so hard for. And so with that, I will be supporting it, this, and again, thanking the whole team for all of their work to get us to this point. So with that, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
No.
Mr. Gold?
No.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
No.
That's 6 in favor and 3 opposed. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. New business application filed on behalf of Aldi, owner of property located at 511 New Park Avenue, also known as West Hartford Place, located within Special Development District 94. The application seeks permission to amend the previously approved conditions of approval to eliminate the restriction which prohibits the sale of liquor within the SDD. Without objection, I move that we set this item for a virtual public hearing on February 23rd, 2021 at 7:15 p.m. and refer to TPZ Drac, and Krug. There being no objection, looking, the motion passes. B, ordinance authorizing an appropriation of $365 million to fund all or a portion of the town's unfunded actuarial accrued liability with respect to the town's employee pension plan and authorizing the issuance of general obligation pension bonds in an amount not to exceed $365 million to finance such appropriation. Without objection, I move that items 7B and C, which is also the ordinance establishing a general obligation pension bond reserve fund, be jointly set for a virtual public hearing at 6:30 p.m. on January 26th. Is there any objections? Okay, seeing no objection, the motion passes. Ordinance establishing a civilian police review board. Without objection, I move that we set for public hearing on February 9th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, the motion passes. A resolution appropriating an historic documents preservation grant in the amount of $7,500. Mr. Hart, would you like to explain this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. We are seeking council approval of this resolution to appropriate $7,500 in grant funds. We would use the grant specifically for storage cabinets and land record binders. And I would like to thank Town Clerk S.E. LeBreau for her great track record of writing successful grant applications under this program for many years now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Thank you, Essie, for you are very creative, and again, you do have a great batting record here. So appreciate it. Keep going. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this? All right. Without objection, I move adoption of item 7E. And if there's no objection, the motion passes and the resolution is adopted. Okay. Resolution authorizing the town manager to participate in the Homeland Security Grant Program. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager, seeking council approval to submit an application under the Homeland Security Grant Program. This is an initiative that the town has participated in for many years now through the Capital Region Council of Governments. This is federal money passed down to the state and then administered by Region 3, which is comprised of 41 municipalities. That includes most of the Capital Region, plus a couple of others. We've utilized the grant funds in the past for a whole variety of emergency management and homeland security type items, including supporting our regional hazmat team, our bomb squad, training, etc. We've also been awarded funding in the past to purchase various types of equipment. So we're preparing this application now. If it's successful, we will be coming back to you seeking your approval to appropriate the monies. This is just the application stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hart? Okay. Seeing none, without objection, I move adoption of item 7F. Again, is there any objection? Okay. There being no objection, the motion passes and the resolution is adopted. All right. Now we go to announcements. I have a couple. First is the COVID memorial. The Presidential Inauguration Committee will host a memorial to remember and honor the lives lost to COVID-19 in cities and towns across the country on Tuesday, January 9th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. A Washington, D.C. ceremony will feature a lighting around the Lincoln Memorial, reflecting pool, a first ever lighting memorial memorializing American lives lost. We invite you at home to ring a bell or light a candle at 5:30 p.m. next Tuesday for this countrywide monument of remembrances. I don't know with security concerns, this was written before that, or the invitation was issued right before. So we don't know how those will play out, but we will, I'm sure, post all of that on our website. And then we have the MLK Celebration, 25th, our own 25th Dr. Martin Luther King's life celebration from 10 to, normally is 10 to 11:30 on that day, and we are going to be filming it virtually. So will not be on, obviously in the town hall as we normally gather, and it's heartbreaking. This year's keynote speakers are Corey Mackey and AJ Johnson of the Center for Leadership and Justice. Adrian Billings-Smith, Esquire, will serve as Master of Ceremonies. The 2021 celebration also includes a welcome from me, a prayer from members of the Connecticut Council of Interreligious Understanding, student speeches by Taylor, this is the best part of all, Taylor Santana of Conard High School and Megan Rodriguez-Hawkins of Hull High School. The event features musical performances by West Hartford Public School students, including Emma Billings of Aiken School, Ty Kachawa Kamiso of Conard High School, Hull Choraleers, Conard Solo Choir, Latanya Farrell, a Hull parent, singer, songwriter, and principal of Stanford Elementary School in Bristol, will also perform a solo, and the program will end with We Shall Overcome, sung by the Conard, Hall, Bristow, Sedgwick, and King Philip choirs. Viewers are at home are encouraged to sing. It will be a very powerful and meaningful service, and I really look forward to seeing that. I just miss all of you, and hope we can. I'm looking forward to doing this again in person, but please sign in. All right, I know Mr. Gold had asked me to, he had put his hand up, so I'm going to start with Mr. Gold. Go ahead, Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. I have some thoughts, and if you'll indulge me. We've been taught to study history. We've taught to learn from it, try not to repeat and make the same mistakes, so that as a society, we can grow stronger and make each generation that follows better. We have, however, lost our way. I've witnessed in my lifetime something I could never have imagined happening. An insurrection of our government. This cannot happen nor be tolerated in our democracy. Our democracy is founded upon principles that are rooted in truth, justice, civility, and respect for our fellow citizens. What we have witnessed recently has brought whispers of decades and centuries past. We must move beyond any form of violence, hate, anti-Semitism, or racism. Violence is not acceptable and should be abhorred. The election is over. We will have a new president on January 20th. Mr. Biden will be that individual, and we must trust that he will lead our nation with honor, integrity, and dignity. I will do everything I can to help ensure he succeeds for the good of our nation. This is my duty and obligation as an elected official for all the residents of West Hartford, Republican, Democrats, Independents, and unaffiliated. Now is the time we must come together to begin the healing process. We must honor our First Amendment rights of free speech. We have to be willing to acknowledge another person standing in front of you and advocating at the top of their lungs that which you have spent your entire life fighting against at the top of yours. On a personal note, I am truly concerned that one of our fellow town council members has been vilified by exercising First Amendment rights of speech. In my humble opinion, the comment was not designed to incite any sort of violence. However, I agree that all of us, elected officials, local, state, and federal levels, are held to a much higher standard. We have been elected to represent our town. We must set an example for those that come after us, not just our children, but for all generations to follow. We will be judged on how we proceed and act today for millennia. We have to make the right choices. The choice is each of ours. Condemn this assault on the core principles of our nation, or continue to pour salt on the open wounds January 6th created. I, for one, will try my best to lead by example. I will work tirelessly to help heal this fractured nation and our community so that our country will endure as the shining beacon of democracy, civility, and hope to the world. We have a great deal of work ahead. let us begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. And I would guess other people want to speak too. And I just wanted to, this was on my notes and I didn't read it, so I apologize. The rules of decorum, we ask everyone to be courteous and respectful to their fellow counselors. Robert's Rules of Order. Anything other than that will be ruled out of order. So I'm going to go in, I know a lot of people would like to say something, so I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So like many of you, I was disturbed on the activities that occurred January 6th. I was actually at work. You all know that I work for the Department of Public Health. So we have a pandemic that is raging and that we are all experiencing and living through. And when I received word of first what was supposed to be a protest, then turned into a mob based on media reporting and actually heading up the stairs of our nation's capital to storm, I was in disbelief. And the reason why I was in disbelief is because I didn't understand how that even occurred. And I thought back to the summer when you all know that we had many protests and we even had our own protests here on Town Hall. And I thought about the way that those protesters were treated. And not only were they treated, but how public safety, the National Guard, police, and a number of individuals were brought out well ahead of time in preparation for peaceful protests, not only in Washington, D.C., but all across the country. And I felt, wow, why? For Black and brown people? Really? In 2020? And now here we are in 2021? I gotta tell you that I felt sick, I felt angry, disgusted, but more importantly, I thought about the future that is behind us, our children. What are we telling them? What kind of examples are we setting? And it doesn't matter, right? What color, what religion you practice, or any of it. Children are children, and they're looking at us, they're listening to the news, and they can't understand what is happening. So, Councilman Gold, when you talk about leaders and setting examples, how do we hold each other accountable? I believe in the summer I said, how do we call each other out? We can disagree and we can agree to disagree. But when we begin to engage in the types of acts that were done on January 6th, I was sickened when I saw police officers who take an oath to protect the public that were beaten and intimidated. I gotta tell you, we have arrived at a very new low. And we all need to recognize and hold not only each other, but everybody else accountable when they start talking and spewing hateful things and talking about what they're going to do. Because if you think words don't matter, we're all just kidding ourselves. Now, the weekend coming up is Martin Luther King weekend and a very momentous occasion. But instead, we're all worried about safety and whether or not we can go anywhere at this point because we don't know who's a loose cannon and who's going to do what. Imagine that this is the United States of America. And this is what is on our minds in 2021. As each year advances, we're supposed to be getting better. But instead, it appears that we're backsliding. So how do we change? What do we do about that? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves. I believe First Lady Michelle Obama, when she said, we don't go low. We got to go high, folks. We got to hold each other accountable. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. Wrong is wrong, is right is right. And we got to start holding people accountable, and we got to start calling people out. And we can do better, and we must do better. And I'm going to leave it there. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Carol. That was very well said, and I know so heartfelt. And when I called you after and just the shocking difference of the way the Black Lives Matter and this whole thing was handled was just beyond. Was just beyond. Okay, we'll go to Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Words matter. Let me repeat that. Words matter. Listening matters. Let me repeat that. Listening matters. Building trust, seeking common ground, fostering peace, promoting our democratic principles, respect, let me repeat that, respect for our fellow human being. That's what matters. And what happened on January 6th was probably, no, it wasn't probably, it was the lowest point I've seen firsthand through television accounts of actions that cannot be excused. It was individuals who felt that it was their right to overthrow what we hold so dear, what we hold so important, what we teach our children, that this is the greatest country in the world. But we have a lot of work to do going forward. I'm optimistic that with a new administration, the healing can begin. People can reach out to each other, can be there for each other, can start to listen to each other, to gain trust and respect for each other, because words matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Fay?
Hold on. Thank you. It took me a while to get this right. This was a very emotional time, I think, for everybody in the United States. And I'm not even going to address parties because it doesn't matter. I was out all day. I happened to be out all day on Thursday the 6th. And when I came home, I was in shock seeing what had happened. You all know I have the Capitol, something aspirational for me, behind me, and to see that sacred place trampled on was shocking. I don't think there's a person that I know that condones what happened on that day. But for me, what was even more troubling is I ended up being a lightning rod for this event due to a really silly, benign, unrelated, not even a post, a comment on a post with terminology that I'm not going to rehash this all. You all can go look at it. And for those who are listening, I think you fed the fuel, and I've never felt as threatened and in harm's way as I have since people barraged my Facebook, my Twitter, my email, my phones, and my texts. I'm going to switch to a written statement because I I think I need to because it's that important. And if I am a lightning rod for being threatened, then we all can be, where we did absolutely nothing wrong. I was not in DC, nor would I have planned to be in DC. What happened last Thursday, there are no words for. The incident at the Capitol is an unprecedented, historical, sad event. I am ashamed that our West Hartford leaders, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor and Minority Leader Lee Gold, have issued a joint statement that became at least 2 Hartford Courant articles and a minimum of a Yahoo Internet article accusing me of inciting the Friday Capitol incident based on a benign Facebook comment on a friend's post days before. They know me. They know I do not believe in any of these things that have transpired. They've seen me call out President Trump when he needs to be, and they've seen me stand up to power. And now I am facing threats, imminent threats. And if anything happens to my family as a result of this, words do matter. And we know who placed those words in the statement that went to weha.com and the Hartford Courant. Imagine my shock. Imagine my shock on the day after what happened at the Capitol to get a call from a Courant reporter. Why would he be calling me? I had no idea. He wanted to talk about this Hartford Courant article and said he had talked to Mayor Cantor and Mr. Gold already, and that they had named me as the person they were referring to as a member of the council that was a threat. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. All my life, I've had people judge me. I've had to justify myself throughout my lifetime. When I was a young executive in finance, a career dominated by men, I had to justify myself. I had to justify myself to belong there. As a woman who loves another, I had to justify myself before the law caught up to speed on gay rights. And now I need to justify myself to Sherry Cantor and Lee Gold and the mob they created as they question my ethics, integrity, and honor as an elected official. All based on a social media post as a comment to a friend of 2 words one day before these unprecedented historical events never seen before, nor were anticipated, and I'm certainly not clairvoyant. Yes, words matter. And the words out of these 2 leaders matter greatly, and I'm the recipient of the fallout. And now they have the audacity to publicly shame me, and my safety and those of my family hangs in the balance. My constituents, my job opportunities, my future career political opportunities hang in the balance as well, as you have brought into question me as a terrorist and one who incites violence. I want to cry. I can't believe it. We work together on the council. We sit together, and this is what I get. I nor anyone else is a perfect person. But if there's one thing I know that has been taught during this dismal time, is when we display hate, we need to recognize the face and the mirror looking back at us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Ms. Kerrigan?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Fay, I do apologize for any threats that you have received. I have experienced that being the lead plaintiff in a marriage equality case. I know how quickly and how scary that is. So my heart goes out to you, and to Councilor Blanks, being an individual of color. I cannot imagine watching that when you could see the difference in the way these individuals were handled as opposed to other ones. So I don't like that. Nobody does. But there's a saying that says, all politics is local. And this is where the buck stops. And this is where the boots are on the ground. And we need to stop blaming. And as one of 7 councilors in the West Hartford Town Council, led by Mayor Cantor and Minority Leader, Mr. Gold, we earn our seats of leadership and honor to serve this great town by individuals, legal voters who cast votes. And again, as we did tonight, we may not always agree on the topic at hand. Here was ADUs. We express our opinions and we cast our vote. So we're charged with the future of our town, of West Hartford, of the safety, of education with respect to the budget. And we feel comfortable sitting at this table or by way of Zoom. We express our thoughts, our opinions after doing our research, and we cast votes. And those votes are respected and stand for something. That vote, the greater number, determines what our future safety, education, or zoning will be. We have to be able to differentiate between opinions, wants, and facts. We may not like or want the results of the vote, but we never call into question the fact that it was a vote, it was a number. We all agree what is a fact and what is a lie. We may not like the results, the resulting vote, but we never ever walk around our town saying it was a fraud. Facts are not lies. And sitting on the council, we can agree and trust that the facts that we share are not lies. But now we find ourselves in a place where on a national level, that's exactly what happened. And it made me wonder, what if our last election, one of the candidates that's sitting, one of the councilors sitting here, or even the mayor or the minority leader, called into question, saying, I really won. It was fraudulent. Questioning the process, saying it wasn't true, putting out on Facebook, and others joining in, saying, yeah, that's right. That person really did win. This was a fraud. What would happen even after all of our registrars, all of the town clerk, the leaders of our town, the attorney general, the town councilor, Denise Merrill, and every single individual of authority objectively, with facts, made it clear that in fact there was no fraud, that you lost. But that candidate continued to insist that in fact there was fraud in the election. I can't imagine the voters in West Hartford sitting there, those that bought into it, because they see on social media that in fact this was all a lie. The erosion of the trust of our system is at what's at stake here. The trust of the residents, the voters in our town, what's in question here. So what happens is when you go onto social media and you already are inclined to not like what's happening, it is very easy for the hate groups, whether they're the QAnon, rebranded Nazis, or the anti-Semites, or the white supremacists, or the anti-LGBTQ, you name it. Those groups see the posts and they say, oh, this legitimate candidate, this individual who maybe ran before, who I like, even that individual is supporting the cause and saying, no, that was a fraudulent election. And they jump on that bandwagon with all their vigor. And on the day that we're supposed to be sworn in, that candidate chooses to have a rally to get everyone going, yeah, that candidate really did win. Your votes didn't count. Your votes didn't count. This election was stolen. And then there's things on social media that said, yeah, stop the steal. And again, thumbs up. Yeah, way to go. I'm behind you. I believe that. Those things matter. And Chief Reddick is sitting there having to decide, how much of a big deal is this? Will this really materialize into something that's violent? I think we find ourselves in a very serious place right now. And we can all agree that if the leader at that time stood up and said there was no fraud, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I think we need to really hold our elected officials accountable. I'm not saying opinions can't be shared that we don't agree with. We can disagree. But when it comes to a fact, any elected official who starts going on social media, pushing facts that are lies, we need some recourse. So I guess my question to Dallas Dodge, since he's our corp counsel, what recourse do we have if we find out that on our, let's say, our Board of Ed, there's an individual that in fact believes in flat earth or believes in white supremacy? As elected officials, what recourse do we have at this time? And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. I don't know if that's rhetorical. We can circle back with Mr. Dodge after. We'll go to Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was not going to speak until I've heard everyone's passion tonight. I think over the last year or so, we've all been stuck in our homes and been restricted to seeing things through social media and been bound up a little bit, very, very tight in a lot of places. But I think one of the worst things that has come from that is people communicating in ways in which they would not through social media. And I agree a lot with what Mrs. Kerrigan said here tonight. As elected officials, we all have significant responsibilities that come with that. We also, when we sign up for this job, we give away a lot of the freedoms that we may have as private individuals to comment and say things on social media. And we have to understand that. And when we don't understand that and understand the power that we have when we speak and when we mention, we comment, we are losing track of what we actually ran for. And so when these things come up in town, as they have over the last couple of weeks in response to the situation that took place in Washington, we do have responsibility as elected officials to hold ourselves to higher levels of accountability in regards to what we may believe is our First Amendment right, but it is also others' First Amendment right to hold us accountable to the words that we speak and write and type and place on social media. I commend Mayor Cantor and Mr. Gold for their comments. It is much needed on a bipartisan manner. I'm happy that in our town that we can have our leaders come together in this regard, and I hope full-heartedly support them. I do not support the idea that in any way that your comments led to anyone else taking action on it. Like that is also ignoring the fact of how words do matter. People were looking for leadership the other day when they saw this stuff. It was all over local social media. So with that, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I commend you, Mayor Cantor and Mr. Gold, for stepping up during this tough time. I would like us all to try and do our best over the next couple of days as the country looks to move forward into 2021. But we all have to take a look in the mirror of the words that we use on social media and the responsibilities that we have as council members.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ben Winograd, Town Council. This is one of those times where I'm sort of grateful for the alphabetical order, so I didn't have to go first or toward the front, because I'm still trying to gather my thoughts on this. I agree with almost everything, or probably everything that Liam Sweeney just said. I thought that the statement made in a bipartisan manner was very useful for healing. We need to show examples of us working across somewhat artificial lines and work together on common solutions. Taking a risk because he's coming after me, but my friend Chris Williams and I did agree on very little, remarkably so. Once in a while, I think I'll get him on something, and sure enough, and I think he feels the same about me, just can't do it. But we speak truth to each other. We respect each other's views. There's no hate, and there shouldn't be. And we can work together and again, agree to disagree when we have disagreements and do all that in a cordial manner. But that isn't how it works nationally, unfortunately. Mayor Cantor mentioned at the beginning the victims of this crime that occurred in the Capitol and the officer who was killed and attacked. There were also a couple other victims of Congress people who seem to have caught COVID because colleagues refused to put on their mask in the room they were hiding from the terrorists in. And they laughed at the suggestion. They put on a mask, and at least 2 of those have now caught COVID, which says something about those Congress people and what respect they have for other opinions and for the lives of their colleagues. That was the second most frightening, thing I think I saw this week. That's a little less frightening than various pictures of the mob. To the extent that, the blame for this ultimately rests with the president and his insistence on propagating the big lie. The myth of the stolen election was a classic with absolutely no evidence, supported by 140 Republican congresspeople. That big lie leads directly to the mob believing that what they did was the right thing to do at some level. Because if that lie is true, if in fact a presidential election has been stolen, any remedy seems appropriate at that point, because you attack the very legitimacy of our democracy, and in fact argue that we don't have a democracy anymore, and therefore all the pledges of allegiance to something is void. That's how dangerous those words were. And with social media and Twitter and Facebook, how easy it is to sort of hit like for those lies is frightening. And the positive reinforcement you get within isolated groups from propagating those lies, you get lots of hits, and you get that adrenaline rush from having other likes and comments on your page. So we all have to be so careful about it. And when we err, and certainly, the joke, I've never accidentally caused a revolution, but oops doesn't seem to be a good response to propagating some of these lies and what the result was. But when we err, and as we all do on social media, and support something that we shouldn't support, or endorse a silly view or a meme that's inappropriate, and it happens to all of us, I believe the proper response is to take some personal responsibility. Again, we make mistakes, we encourage things we don't mean to, and then we apologize. And it bothers me that that is something that's difficult for people to do. All in all, ultimately, as leaders, we have that great responsibility. It's not about us. It's about the people we represent. It's about the community. And it's about what we are a symbol of, which is democracy and the ability to debate things and come to what we hope is a right resolution. So with that, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad we only cover light subjects with this body. It's been an extraordinary year in that regard. Sorry, I just want to bring some levity. I know it's a very serious subject. I have a lot of thoughts going through my head, and it's hard to put them all together, especially since I'm going last, and there's been a lot of things said. So, you know, I guess it starts and ends here. I have a 5 and 8 year old, and I thought to myself the other day that I sincerely believe that America will not be better for them than it has been for me unless things change. And that's in all our hands, right? We're the adults. They're the kids, and it's our job to make the world better for them. That's our responsibility. And if we don't do that, we will fail them, and they will have a worse life as a result. And so what happened last week was horrific. Needs to be condemned in the strongest possible terms. And to me, although not the same people, although not the same political persuasion, it's a culmination of what we've been experiencing for the last year. We've had cities taken over, parts of cities occupied. Seattle, people died there. Total anarchy. We've had police stations burned to the ground. America is on fire. And this is probably the most egregious thing that has happened to date. But it's going to get worse. And it's going to get worse unless we stop. And it's going to get worse by different people with different political persuasions. And I think the way it stops is if we just start being honest. I mean, Beth brought up, what do we do if we have an elected official who believes the earth is flat? We'll vote him out. You know, America is allowed to have stupid leaders. And frankly, we have a lot of them. Don't vote for them. Challenge them. But that's the truth. We don't silence people. We challenge their ideas and we defeat them. That's what happens. We don't have violence. That's what America is. We don't silence people. We challenge their ideas and we beat them peacefully. That's how you make America better. You don't silence people. And I'm sorry, I just feel passionately about this. Like all you, Ben and I get coffee all the time. I drive. He takes his bike and wears his helmet. He's very safe. We have good discussions. He wins most of them because we're outnumbered 6-3 on the council. But that's democracy. That's what people in West Hartford have chosen, and we honor it, and that's the way the nation should operate. Not the 6-3, but people honoring the vote. With respect to Ms. Fay, I understand why she was upset. It was unfortunate that the way things happened. Appreciate Mr. Gold's comments about not wanting to have her vilified. I think that's important. And she's a nice lady, as you all know, and sometimes speaks inartfully, but that's often what Irish Catholic folks do. In any event, I appreciate your time, and it's a pleasure to serve with you guys in a cordial manner.
Thank you, Chris. So I will just close by saying then any statement was never intended to vilify or to, and I do not condone, nor does Lee, nor do any of the colleagues here condone any threatening or comments that are at all harmful to anyone's family. We've all been criticized publicly, and we've all had things written about us, and sometimes it's pictures. This was a statement in that many people submitted information, and the information was not only with Lee and I. It was out in the public, and so that is where the press got that information. So, but I do not condone any threatening or comments, but people can disagree and they can be harsh about that disagreement because they should feel strongly. We are in a place in this country that we have not been, and we hopefully will not be for long. But I am very worried, like my colleagues. And the way for us to change it is to be responsible for the way we act. And the point is when we don't agree with something, we can speak up. But then you don't threaten somebody, and you don't act violently, and you believe in truth, and you don't carry around, as Beth said, the lies, that facts are not lies, and facts are facts. And we have a responsibility more than ever to be factual and not to mislead people. And we better get to it. So anyway, I think we've all it's been a long night, and I'm sorry for any targets. That was never the point. The point was to highlight that it's the responsibility of the public to hold their elected officials accountable for their words and their actions. Okay, we don't have an executive session. So I would like to make a motion to adjourn. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Be well, be safe, and